Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Maria Terzi, and I'm the Women Who Code Fellowship Leader for the Women Who Code Emerging Tech track. Today's session is Generative AI, a Future Unimagined, and I'm super excited to welcome our amazing speaker today, Kanchana Patlolla, who is joining us today. Kanchana is a technical solutions manager focused on generative AI. She manages solutions to build generative AI using Google Cloud. She has been responsible for solutions improving operations through generative AI and creating assistance for supply chain management at Google. In her previous role, she was an AI machine learning scientist in Google Cloud Platform. She has architected solutions with major public cloud providers spanning across financial services, retail, agency, and digital narrative companies on their quest to cloud, particularly in their big data and machine learning journey. Kanchana, in her spare time, she loves to try different cuisines and relax with her kids. Kanchana, welcome. I pass the floor to you, and I'm super excited to hear about generative AI. What's the future?
Thank you. Thanks, Maria. I appreciate your time. Can you see my screen? Because I'm new to Zoom and I'm not really familiar with it. So you're able to see my screen?
No. Can you try to share it again?
Okay. Okay. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Now it works.
Okay. Yes. Hello, everyone. I see like lots of folks joining in the call, and it could be very intimate. We can go back and forth with the questions. So looking forward to hear everyone's thoughts here. So I'm as much looking forward to learn from you and to share. So as you could see, I go by Kanch. I am a technical solutions manager in generative AI. What it means is I talk to like 50 to 100 customers a week. I try to understand the problems, identify patterns between the problems, and develop solutions for the customers to meet their needs so that they can help, adopt the platform quicker. So that is my job. And I have been talking to customers since the starting of this year. So pretty much I've covered all the industries, I feel. This today's journey is going to be very, very high level. So before I start, can you tell me how many of you have heard of Gen AI? I just want to make sure I understand the level set so that so it looks like two of you, Gabby and Amber, seems to have heard. So the rest of you have not heard of generative AI, or I'm assuming you probably know ChatGPT or Bard, and you have tried off. How many of you tried off? Okay, so there is no one who has tried. That's interesting. Normally at this kind of session, I would see people who have tried. So Gabby has tried. So looks like at least one of you have tried. So I'm going to just set a high level ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot. Yeah, that's a fair start. So I'm going to just start it at a high level, and I want to hear from you if there's any questions I can answer. So to start with, I wanted you to look at this picture and look at this picture and tell me what's the difference. So I come from the era of, going to library, doing our research, but no longer does people have time to go to library and do our research, and we always start in Google. And this is how Google started in 1998. This was the beta version of how Google looked like, and we just celebrated our 25 years anniversary. Look at this picture and look at this picture. What is different between both? I don't see the answer, but I'm going to highlight. So this picture was this picture. In this picture, no one is holding a mobile phone, whereas in this picture, people are holding the mobile phone. Do you see it? So we are at a evolution point, and we have advanced in the capability of how we rise. So this is a graph of how the adoption of ChatGPT was compared to other platforms. As you could see, there was Instagram, Spotify, Facebook, Twitter, Netflix. It all took time to get the number of users, but the ChatGPT had 100 million users by in the first day. So we are at an emerging point, and are we at a hype? First, we need to understand that before we focus on it. Since the starting of the year, there has been some research on what is the potential market. And the estimated market for this is going to be about billions of dollars. This comes from a research by presidents, and you could, of course, get the information. But it showcases the potential of where things are evolving towards. I apologize for me moving around because there is challenges with the charger here. Okay. So now let's jump into what is generative AI. Can anyone give an high level of what generative AI is, or what have you thought about it? Because it looks like some of you have experimented ChatGPT and you know high level what it looks like. You probably did. Give me a recipe, give me an itinerary, how do I do this, etc. Okay. So prior to all of this generative AI thing, this is normally the slide I would share. It means that under artificial intelligence umbrella, there are several categories. There is robotics, estimation, optimization, machine learning, and machine learning is one of the categories. And as you could see here, each of those fields are a ladder under artificial intelligence. And some of these already existed. So if I look at image or object detection, image classification, natural language generation, it already existed, but we named it as generative AI now. But prior to that, these field of study did exist. So how did we change? With generative AI, as you could see, you probably have experimented creating text by, asking questions. If you are a developer, you probably had code generation, code assistance, code completion. Or it could be like, how do I generate a dialogue with generative AI? And these are what are called as modals. And some generative AI, large language models, are multimodals, and some are very much one modality. So that the the amount of data it gets trained on is what the differentiator is between those platforms. Have you had experience with other modalities other than natural language? So, if have you used Midjourney? Have you used any other video generation platforms? Have you used, DALI? Has anyone experienced any other platform? Yes, Midjourney for pictures. Yes, yeah. So that is one modality, and combining all of this together is what is going to make a pretty amazing feature. So I'm going to talk through what is generative AI, and this is really important. With generative AI, the basic piece of it is a creation of content based on the data the model is trained on. In a pre-generative AI world, it used to be very much focused on the data which is trained on, which is just small data, whereas which large language models or foundation models, it's going to be vast amounts of data it's trained on. And based on that, it creates the content it's relevant to. So I'm just going to have this example so that you understand what it means. And this is a natural language example. So the reason why I insist on that is generative AI is a fancy autocomplete. It is very probabilistic in nature. It's not deterministic. It doesn't know what the context is. It just tries to predict. So in this context, we decided to play. Then you have to finish the next sentence. So it's probably going to decide between game, in, ball, and if it were to decide what it is, it's going to give an approximate percentage and decide we decided to play a game of the chess in the rain, ball, etc., and determine what's the closest thing it can come up with based on the context. Does anyone understand this? Um, Creating reels from videos. Yeah, that's true. So, does everyone understand that generative AI is still very much a fancy autocomplete? It is not understanding the context. It doesn't have the sense of, okay, these are the outcomes it's trying to deliver. How does it's the probabilistic nature because based on the content it has read, say if it has read more of we decided to play ball as it, then it's probably is going to give that as a higher score versus we decided to play in the rain as the, you know, less context. So the more it has read on that specific topic, it's going to give more importance to it. And there are some features as well. So if you want your model to be creative, there is something called temperature between 0 and 1, and you can adjust the temperature to make it more creative, more, out of the box, or you can make it more, very restrictive. And there are some other metrics if you are into it, top K, top M, which determines where in the probabilistic you need to get the outcome of. But those are tuning capabilities which you don't need to know. But in a regular chat GPT or whatever you're using today, they have it in the average one. So that's why sometimes you can see it is very creative when you ask questions, and sometimes it's not. But I would suggest that you do realize that it is very much a autocomplete and it doesn't understand the context. Because I see folks thinking about using the generic chat GPT for medical, results or things like that. I There are some large language models very much focused on medicine, and you could use that to leverage some of the capabilities, but you shouldn't be using the general purpose model for specific purposes because the generic purpose model has other things as well. It has all the Taylor Swift lyrics, and you're not going to need any of that for your medical, decision making. So you need to be very prescriptive and understand that this is a fancy autocomplete, and it is going tend to, have its pitfalls, which I will go through in a bit, and it does come with challenges that we need to be aware of. So even though when I talk about a future is unimagined, we need to go with the perspective of there is going to be challenges with it. So I'm going to go a little bit about what are the building blocks in the sense I'm going to just touch the pillars, and there are some changes which you could do it. This used to be the life of a model in a previous world of machine learning or artificial intelligence. There is always the data preparation, you have to train it, you have to iterate it, and someone does the inference, and someone takes care of the operationalization of the model. This is a huge task done by multiple peoples. It's developers, it's data scientists, it's ML engineers, it's data engineers, all of them come together. But in a Gen AI era, things change because if you're using the foundation model, or I will get through that, what it means, if you use the base one, the operationalization piece of it becomes less. It reduces the task, but it doesn't simplify it, it reduces the task. So, one of the key concepts which you need to be aware of is foundation model. And foundation model is really, really important. What is foundation model? It is a large for natural language context. It could be for any modals as we identified. It is trained on multiple sets of data, large corpuses of data to provide specific tasks. And those tasks could be anything. It could be information extracting, it could be sentiment analysis, it could be any of those. And let me go through what these foundation models are. If you have seen any of this, so we started the journey because Google introduced transformers, which is the T in GPT is comes from the Google paper transformers. And since then, there have been a lot of companies working on this platform, either with open source models or proprietary models, and they are releasing, things which are further fine tuning the abilities, and they are highly influential in decision making. And you could use any of these, and all of these are foundation models which could be leveraged. So you could go ahead, download, say, Bloom, which is from Hugging Face, and ask the same questions you ask ChatGPT, and you would probably get a different question based on the data it's trained on. And these foundation models are the layer, and you need to understand that it doesn't have to be GPT, it can be anything, but it all holds specific purpose on specific tasks. Before I go with the next topic, can you give me an understanding of, do you understand what foundation models are and why it's used? It's a very slow crowd. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to actually go to the next one, which is prompts. I don't know if you saw this tweet. It was tweeted for like 2 million or 3 million times at that time. And it said the hardest new programming language is English because the way you can talk that through with the prompts. You might have all used prompts with ChatGPT. Prompts are essentially the questions you ask the foundation models. So you might have asked, hey, create an itinerary for a family of 3, family of 4. That's essentially a prompting. And you could give some context. I am in India, create an itinerary for family of 3. That's context. Or you could say a role. You are a sales representative for Southwest Airlines. Create an itinerary for family of 3. Or you could give examples. Like here, it just says add 2 plus 2. Or you could give 3 plus 3 is 6. Then add 2 plus 2. It means that you're giving an example, one example, that's one shot prompting, and then you're expecting. Or it could be 2 shot prompting, or it could be multiple set, like there is chain of thought, there is general knowledge, there is self-consistency. There is multiple ways of how to do prompting. In fact, prompt engineering is a field by itself these days, because leveraging the questions correctly yields you the answer which you would need at the right time. Before I start, because I am uh, coming to a point that I'm going to go into how enterprises use it today, but I would love to hear if there's any questions with respect to the foundation models, prompting techniques, and there are some augmentation techniques as well, but we won't go into it. Any questions specifically? Okay. So I'm going to talk about the enterprise landscape. And enterprise landscape, as this comes from a research from Sequoia Capital, talks about how many use cases we are going to uncover and who are the primary players in the space. And as you could see here, there are a lot of modals. The middle one, text code, image is the modal, and the application use cases are a lot. And these are the companies which are working on it. So enterprises are looking at it, and I talk to them almost every week pretty closely. But are we ready yet? And that's why you need to understand the pitfalls of um, the pitfalls of leveraging a large language model. So I'm going to take 1 minute to answer Lena's question. Lena, um, how we use foundation models. So in your day-to-day life, you probably are using ChatGPT, Bard for your, asking questions. But in an enterprise world, imagine, so I'm going to use that landscape example here. I hope you can see this clearly. So imagine sales team, okay? Sales team wants to write an email, and they have information about a company which they want to search. So the ability to search that information in an organization from inside and outside, and then draft an email, provide the summary where needed, and then maybe create some charts based on the expectations or the interactions which they had with them in the past, and send them an email. All of this can be done through generative AI. So the foundation models are the base of it, which leverages, you could ask questions like, based on what I know about this company, draft an email. And it would be able to draft an email, pull together information, and present it. And that is how it will be used in enterprises. So foundation model gives them the base capability and then adds on with whatever is your enterprise data, which adds more value, and then creates an application to present. Did I answer your question, Lena? Okay. So, Lena, you're welcome to, reach out to me as well later if you have further questions. Happy to, get this. So there are a lot of pitfalls with using generative AI, and we need to be aware of it as, someone who's ready to adopt it. The first concept is hallucination. How many of you have asked a question to generative AI and experienced challenges? Like, just it gets so creative that it does some bullshit answer. It is, it's not even true, but it just talks very confidently. If you haven't, that's one of the major pitfalls because as I said, it's fancy autocomplete. So it just thinks, okay, if I don't know, then I'm going to make it up. So hallucination is a major challenge. And it's the bias which comes with it as well, because it is largely reliant on the data which is available. So you need to be, um, very prescriptive. And also, there are a lot of copyright issues because it's being trained on data which is copyrighted. So I heard someone saying, I use Midjourney, and there have been some challenges or questions with respect to how the data is trained. Similar, if you have used GitHub Copilot or Microsoft Copilot, there are some questions on that as well. So there are some questions. And there is the last concept which is challenging is prompt injection, which essentially is if you have heard of SQL injection, it's a similar concept, the ability of tampering the prompt, that the results become challenging. So those are considered the important pitfalls of generative AI. And when you're designing an application, you need to be very conscious about it. I see one question in the Q&A which says, why generative AI is so different then? Yeah, it's a great question. One thing though, in a previous AI world, we train the data and the models are created for a specific task. So for a sentiment analysis, it's one. For prediction is another one. For um, clustering, it's something else. So each of those AI tasks, the data is supplied by us, and the models are trained for that specific purpose. But in a generative AI world, the foundation models are just trained against large corpuses of data. So it is very different in the sense that it can do a lot of things and some of the things very well, but it can do a lot of things. So it's not created for one specific task versus it's created for multiple tasks. And that's why it is very helpful in today's world when you ask a question and it's able to retrieve the answer. Did I answer your question? If not, please feel free to reach out to me. Happy to discuss about that. So there are considerations which we need to take if you are in a role. Getting from hype to reality is going to take some time, and that needs understanding of what generative AI is. And you need to have um, how to bring product and market it sooner. Have an understanding of that. And there is going to be a lot of new roles which are going to come up: Gen AI architect, prompt engineers. I already see them on LinkedIn. So there is going to be a lot of jobs. But there's a lot of companies which are working on it. If you're not following, I would recommend follow some of these logos, because all of these are doing amazing work with respect to how to bring generative AI in enterprises. And that's like these companies do a pretty good job. If you ask me who probably the winner right now is, probably the NVIDIA because of the chips. But all of these companies do amazing job. I did want to point out resources which will be helpful. There are resources you should have a look at it. Happy to share the slides so that you can um, have an experience with it. But this space is so evolving that we need to be um, up to date. There's no current information because the thing which was discussed yesterday becomes outdated tomorrow, in my opinion, and it's hard to catch up. How do we ensure data security of a customer when we use foundation models? So yes, so that's Desi, that's one of the challenges you might have seen. Like, many companies are blocking the use of ChatGPT or other, products out there, just because we're not sure about where the model or the data is going to be trained on. And there are multiple reports going back and forth on that. One thing you need to be clear of is foundation models are owned by the company which is created, right? Whether it's like any company it is. So if you are in an enterprise and if you are thinking data security is important, you need to understand if the data is going back and forth, what is happening to your prompts, how are they being used to train the data. And there are options which are augmentation tools called adapters, which come into existence. So you won't train the foundation model, you would create an adapter model which gets added that essentially is changing the weights to align them so that the data security is maintained in an enterprise. So that question is valid, and you need to be very sure, understand the terms of services, understand where the data is going. It's not just the data. Like I know you asked about data. Your prompts are also your own, like the prompts which gets asked. And so you need to be very specific on where is the prompts going, how is it being processed, is it being used to train, and you need to avoid that. So to avoid that, there are organizations which are building the adapter model, where you are the owner of that adapter piece and you would be able to access it. And happy, Desi, to answer any question on this. If you have leveraged Google Cloud, like if you go search Google Cloud adapter model, you should be able to find some good content out there. So I am open to questions. I'm here to answer any questions you might have. I did want to put a slide to get some feedback and understand your thoughts, and if there's any, good feedback you can provide me. And one thing is for sure, though, this is the time of change. We are going through a revamp of tomorrow's world, and all of us are in this journey together, and we need to be able to have an ability to change. So I'm here to answer questions. Feel free to jump in. Happy to talk about anything. I do talk to multiple customers a day. I would love your feedback, uh, but I would love to hear more.
Kanchana, thank you so much for your talk. It was certainly very useful to hear firsthand from you how generative AI is used. And in your everyday life, you're dealing with customers that are using foundation models to improve their services. Can you maybe share, you don't need to mention the company, but can you share some examples where you have seen generative AI making a dramatical difference in a company? Or improve the processes and their services?
Yes. So let me talk about a user journey, right? So that you understand. Because there are multiple personas which are going to get impacted. But going to talk about, a customer experience. In today's world, I am sure you all use bots and you get frustrated, right? I normally just call and say, I want to talk to a human. That would be my thing, because I get so frustrated with the bots and the ability for it to not being able to understand what I'm asking and questions. That experience is going to completely revamp because of how the experience is getting created. So, for example, in today's world, with generative AI, you could create a bot which you could say, um, I want this bot to be empathetic when you share a response, right? And assuming you're a travel company, and I start chatting, and I said, I met with an accident and I have to travel. So in the previous world of the bot, you probably get a response saying, how can I help you with the itinerary? That's it, because that's what it's supposed to say. It doesn't know that it is not expecting a, a empathetic question, right? Whereas, say, if you are an insurance company, then they probably were expecting an accident, but not for the travel company. But just because the model is trying to give empathetic response, you probably would get asked, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Are you okay? So even that experience is going to change. Just that's just one piece of it. In every layer, I can see us evolving. Another example, right? So if you are, how ads are generated, it's targeted based on what you like, what you have seen, etc. Recommendations come. This exists today. But imagine a world that every ad is created in large scale for everyone. So I like Robin Arson. So imagine Robin Arson is selling me Under Armour gear. But for you, maybe you like Ali. So Ali is selling you Under Armour gear because you like her. And all of this can be automated. And that's what makes it unique. So in the prior world, it would be just what you like. And based on, say, if 1,000 people like Ali Orson, Ali, then it's going to be Ali, which is producing that ad, versus it's going to be auto-generated with all of these influences. So that is like the way things are going to change. And it's going to be very, very interesting.
It sounds very interesting. And we have more questions coming up. So
Can
one
we
of
get,
what
yes,
about
yeah, go ahead.
bias? So
I think
we'll
I see one question before this. Can we get a foundation model and retrain it locally? So there are multiple options, like left to right. If you go right, you probably have used prompt tuning. And then I talked about the adapter tuning. And then there is something called reinforcement learning with human feedback. And then the last one is fine tuning. And fine tuning is very, very expensive. I I don't see 90% of the companies who would probably do it. The fine tuning companies probably are going to be the next gen big companies which will be doing it because it takes a lot of compute to retrain it locally. If you were to experiment it, you probably are in that category of retraining it in the sense you are creating an adapter model by giving your data so that it adjusts the weights and that can be leveraged. So that's the way I would talk about it. So I wouldn't see many people doing the retraining it locally because it takes, that's why even if you look at ChatGPT or Bard, they don't retrain it that frequently. You can see the last update one is like probably 2 months ago or something, just because it takes a while to reproduce it. I hope I answered your question, Lena.
Kanchana, I have a follow-up questions on this one. So what's the difference between retraining and fine-tuning the model?
Retraining is fine tuning.
Okay.
So that's the last piece of it. And very few companies probably would be in that category. But there will be some.
Absolutely. And when you are, we're saying expensive, computationally expensive, you need someone will need to have the infrastructure,
Yes.
the resources mainly to train it locally on new data.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. I hope this answered a lot of the questions. And we have another question. It's about the
What about
bias.
the bias?
In artificial intelligence,
Yes.
there is inherent bias. We had seen a lot of examples in the past. What about AI, and how is there bias, and how we can measure it, and how we can fight it?
There's obviously bias, for sure. And particularly with the large foundation models, because it's trained on the data which is available on the internet. Um, every organization these days are not publishing what the data is trained on. So we don't know for sure. And there is going to be a lot of bias in it. If you're an enterprise and you're developing your application models, I would first test it, of course. I would also have a approach of trust but verify. I wouldn't just put it into production without having an approach where a human is in the middle, at least for now. And I would also use some prompting techniques to make sure it is not biased so that it understands that it should not be biased. And I would also have a customer feedback always in there to make sure you're understanding what the results are coming and training it. Bias at this point of time is not something which can be reduced just by using a foundation model. So it does exist, and we need to be aware of that pitfall. I hope I answered the question. Okay.
Yes, I think it's clear. And what about other ethical concerns?
There are ethical concerns, and so I don't think generative AI is still in its infancy. There is a lot of challenges, and that's why I wanted to highlight the challenges in the slide, because there are ethical concerns, particularly with the copyright issues, particularly what the model is being trained on, and it's not that transparent from organizations on what the data is being trained on and how it's being influenced, etc. So if you are using a foundation model from the organization, you need to be looking at the terms of service of who is liable for if where there was a problem. And there are commitments from some of the large organizations of where the shared responsibility between customer and the cloud provider lies. And you just need to be aware of it. I do not think that it is resolved, but you need to be clear with your customers. Sometimes qualify it saying this is AI generated. So if you're creating a picture, make sure you have it as AI generated. If you're creating a video, make sure it's AI generated so that the customer is aware that it is being created and not someone is working on it.
Interesting.
I also,
So you think in
I
the
also,
bots, someone will write, so this is an AI,
yes,
you
it
shouldn't
should.
lie that it's not an actual person speaking with the customers.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Ideally, I would think every organization need to look at or create a AI principle strategy. So things they can do and things they cannot do. And they probably should have a COE kind of an organization where they are looking at all these AI use cases, which is going to come a lot, of whether it makes sense for them to use it or not. So that way, um, there is an overarching team in your organization who understands the complexities and react to it, in my opinion. So there should be an ethical team, is what I'm saying.
Kanchana, I have another question for you. So at Women Who Code, most of our members are women who are just starting their careers. They have some coding experience, but they're not experts in AI. So how would you advise someone who just wants to start with generative AI? What are the first steps that someone should take to get on and use some tools or build some products for their company or experiment with it?
I would first say start taking some crash courses. There's a lot of free content out there. Google has supplied a lot of free content. There's also from Databricks. There's also from deeplearning.ai, and there's from Microsoft. Take something. You pick one cloud provider. It's all the same, in my opinion. Pick one, um, and start building. I'm pretty sure you would have a lot of use cases in mind once it starts. So that's where I would start.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing this advice. And I have another one more general question. I ask this question to everyone who comes to speak here about generative AI and the future. So there are two discussions going on generative AI at the moment. One is open source models versus big companies, big tech models. And the other one is large models that try to do everything and anything, and smaller scale models that are focused on specific tasks. What do you think is best? How one can choose what they need?
It depends on the use case. I don't think there is one size which fits all. So if I'm working on a sales use case, I don't need Taylor Swift's all the lyrics, but maybe there is a use case which needs Taylor Swift's all the lyrics to, produce the answer. I strongly believe, again, I am not backed up with data, but based on my discussion with customers, I strongly believe there is going to be more and more smaller models because it's compute efficient and it's going to be trained very much on the focused data. So there's going to be more and more small models focused on doing smaller things. And there is going to be this large model, which it's consumer facing, which every one of us would be interacting with. But companies are going to be more and more reliant on their data, build their models so that it's very specific to their organization. But again, I have no data to prove that.
And there is a lot of concern as well in the community and everyone who is interested about AI about the regulation of AI and what's going to happen, and if we need to have legislations in place. What's your opinion on this subject?
Every country is coming up with their own stuff, right? So I, I, if I were to, because I'm an AI enthusiast, I would think we need to come up with some global framework which is adaptable for everyone. But I also realize there is very country-specific things which go with based on our NIST guidelines and like the cyber security framework, or if you think about, internet protocols, etc. We were able to come together as one community and we were able to build those frameworks. And in my opinion, AI deserves that as well. But I also realize that every country is coming up with their own frameworks, and at some point we might merge to one, I'm hoping. But if you have looked at the guidelines, they're very similar in nature. They're very focused on consumers' data, very focused on providing the results which are generated and validated. So there are common themes that it will be coming together at some point.
I would also like to hear your opinion about the spread of fake news using generative AI, because we have seen a lot of articles in the press lately about how easily one can create something fake. And now with the technology, you can create bots on Twitter and you can spread the news in no time. How can we regulate this and protect ourselves from it?
It's still available though. The models are available, and you can create a video of me doing something which I probably never did. So I don't know if there is an answer to it, but we just need to be aware that that exists as of now. Companies are trying to stop the usage of it. They are creating violation of contracts, things like that. But it's how to create their own. I don't know how many knows how to do it, but that's honestly, there's no good answer to it for sure. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer to it. That's how
I think all companies try to build the software that can detect if something was AI generated or not, but I'm not sure they work very well. And we have seen some other attacks.
No, I don't think it does. Yeah.
On X now.
I don't think it does.
Sorry, we have some delay with the internet, but can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so on X now.
Yes, yeah. Sorry.
Community moderated content. So they ask people if a certain post is legit or if it's fake.
Generated, yeah.
But it's an
still, there's still chances of things. Sorry, I'm having delay, I think. I apologize.
That's okay. I understand. We're in tune now again?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so I would like your final words. Do you think that computers were going to take all our jobs and they're going to kill us at the end? Or shall we be positive about the future?
I think we should all be positive about the future. There are things which are coming, which is going to help our lives. As you could see, yesterday, Google announced how doctors can use it in their medical search. So there are things which are going to make our life more exciting. Do we have to fix them? Yes. But it doesn't mean we have to be scared about them, where things are going to be more simpler, I hope. Thank you.
Great.
I think it's
and
my
this positive
network.
Yes, that's fine. So with this positive outlook for the future, Kanch, I would like to thank you for being with us today and sharing all this knowledge with us. Thank you everyone who participated and joined this webinar. We do look forward to having our other events later this month. And thank you again